Okay. So yesterday we had started a discussion in the Biurim, in this Divrei Hamaschil, being machzik yidei ovrei avera, supporting someone else's sin, which is what you're doing when you purchase stolen goods from a ganav. And so we pointed out that that's true, even if you can ascertain that the goods no longer belong to the original owner. It's still problematic to support people who are participating in theft. And the only thing that we were in the midst of seeing, which I think we're going to drop for now, is whether it's an Isser de Oraisa or an Isser de Rabbanan. And it boils down to, could the person commit the sin without your participation just as easily? And if the person could commit the sin just as easily without your participation, then your aiding and abetting is only an Isser de Rabbanan. But if through your participation, it enables him uniquely to be able to commit that sin either more easily or more readily, so then what you're doing is an Isser de Oraisa of Lifnei Iver lo sitein michshol, do not place a stumbling block before a blind person. Okay, so there's also a shaila that he deals with, whether or not the prohibition of helping other people sin applies to non-Jews. And I just want to point out that even though there's discussion about this, the consensus is that helping a Gentile sin is also prohibited by a number of poskim. So even if the seller, the person that you're buying from, is a Gentile, that does not mitigate the prohibition of purchasing from a ganav. And let me also, I think it goes without saying that that in addition to that, you're not helping society in general when you purchase from a known ganav, because you're contributing to a breakdown of the economy when you do that, if it's being done on a widespread scale. Furthermore, if the government makes a rule that it's usher to steal from a ganav, usher to purchase goods from a ganav, so then you're also in violation of Dina de Malchus Dina. You're violating the law. And that's another issue that one has to take into consideration as well. All right. So let's now take a look at the next Sif Yud in the Rav Shulchan Aruch. Va'afilu im ein yadua shezeh hachefetz hu gazul o gonuv. Let's say there's a guy that you suspect is selling stolen goods, but the item in question, you're not sure. You're not sure whether it's stolen or not. He says, nonetheless, kevin shahamocher hu gazlan o ganav mifursam, asur liknos mimenu shum davar. But if the person is a well-known ganav, in other words, it's bavust, as they say. Like everyone knows that this guy deals in stolen property. Even though it's possible that this particular item was not stolen, but you still are not allowed to purchase anything from him, because you have to suspect that this item is stolen. And the only exception, he says, is Eli imkein yadua sheyesh lo gam shelo kayotze bo. Unless you're dealing in a situation where, let's say, a guy has a store, and there are certain commodities that he gets in that are stolen, and there are other commodities that he sells that he produces himself. So if you know that this is a particular commodity that he himself produces, and he himself grows, let's say, in his backyard, and he does it legally, so then even though he sells other items that are stolen, you're allowed to purchase this commodity from him nonetheless. Va'az mutter bein liknos bein lehanos mimenu bechinam, and therefore you'd be allowed to purchase it from him. I'm just gonna, someone doesn't know that they're not muted, so I'm just gonna mute everyone. All right. And so then you're allowed to purchase from them, bein lehanos mimenu bechinam, and you can get benefit from them if they want to give you that item, or they want to give you any, if they want to provide you with benefit, that's permitted. as long as they're benefiting you in a way that you're not getting actual stolen goods. Va'afilu yesh lo ma'at shelo kayotze bo, v'harbe kayotze bo shel gezel tolin lahakel shezehu shelo. He says, and this is a big chiddush. He says, even if a lot of the commodity that you are purchasing he gets through stolen channels, and a minority of that commodity he gets in through legal channels, we still allow you to purchase from him on the reliance that there's a possibility, at least, that what you're purchasing from him is not stolen. Aval, and I want you to hold that idea in your head for just a minute, because that sounds a little bit surprising. Aval im yadua shezohi hagezela atzma asur lehanos ba ben liknosa ben ba'oda birshus hagazlan. So, but if you know for a fact that the item that he's selling is stolen, so you're not allowed to get any benefit from it, nor are you allowed to purchase it. So therefore, Bain Ba'oda, whether it's still in the possession of the Gazlan and he just wants to do you a favor with that item, that's also going to be usher, even if he's not interested in selling it to you. Kigon lirkov al gabi behema. He says, for example, let's say the guy says, here, I see you need, I see you need a ride. Come, jump onto the back of my horse or my camel. I'll give you a ride. Well, if you know that this guy is a marauder, a well-known, vandal, and he goes ahead and he steals camels from other people's flocks, so then you're not even allowed to take a ride with him on the camel. And this is true even if the victim who was stolen from has already given up on retrieving the item, as we've already learned in the previous sieve. He says, because this is the difference between stolen goods and mitzias and retrieving, lost property. He says, when you find a lost object, if you can ascertain that the owner had yeyush, you're allowed to keep it. But when you steal something from someone, even if that person had yeyush, it still belongs to them. And the reason is because when you pick something up that's a lost item, you're not doing a prohibited act. But when you steal from someone, you're doing a prohibited act. And therefore, the rabbis instituted that it always remains in the possession of the owner. And it always remains a stolen good until, like we learned yesterday, you do some transformation to the object. Kolzman shehir b'shus hagazlan, as long as it remains within the possession of the gazlan, va'afilu hana'a shegam be'oleha lo hayu makpidim aleha asur lehanos mimena. And therefore, when you see an object that is in the possession of a gazlan and you know that it's stolen, you're not allowed to benefit from that object at all, even if when that object was in the possession of its real owner, the owner would not mind for you to benefit from it. But since it's in the possession of a gazlan, you're not allowed to derive that benefit. Kagon chiluf matbeya b'shavyo mima'os gezulim o genuvim atzman bevadai. So therefore, an example of this would be, do you mind giving me change? Right? Let's say I have a $10 bill and I need to turn this into loonies and toonies. Okay, so normally if I went over to a guy and said, do you have change for a 10? And he had the toonies, he'd be happy to give it to me. He wouldn't mind. But the fact that these toonies are stolen toonies makes it prohibited, even though if they were in the possession of the original owner, he would be happy to help me out. So this is, so we're going to sort of take a look at a few items in this halacha. The first one is that when you know it's stolen, you can't benefit from it at all. And even if you don't know this item in itself is stolen, but you know that the person who is selling it is a known gazlan, is a known ganaf. So then you're not allowed to purchase anything from him unless you know for a fact that some of a particular commodity that he sells is not from stolen property. And even if a percentage of that commodity is not stolen, you'd be allowed to purchase it with relying on the fact that maybe this item that you're purchasing is not from the stolen batch, but is from the legitimate batch. And then, he clarifies, and in this, if he clarifies that anytime something is stolen and is in the possession of the gazlan, it still is usher to have any benefit from it at all, because it's still considered in the possession of the original owner. And the rabbis prohibited us from getting any benefit whatsoever, bichlal, no benefit whatsoever from stolen goods. Okay, so I want to jump ahead for just a minute. And by the way, we do have to finish early today. We have to finish before 6:50 today because it's Rosh Chodesh davening, as I had mentioned on Monday. I'm just going to jump ahead and contrast this halacha with the halacha in Sif Chaf, which we're going to see in a couple of weeks. But if we take a look at Sif Chaf, here, Sif Chaf is on page 18 of this packet. If you're using the packet in front of you, the Rav Shulchan Aruch says in Sif Chaf, he says, "Ukeshem sha'aser lehanos bedavar hagazol bevadai el la'achar yeyosh v'shinoi rishos." Just like you're not allowed to benefit from stolen goods unless the goods have physically changed, or unless they've changed hands and they're no longer in the possession of the gazlan, like we've learned before. Kach aser lehanos bedavar haganov va'afilu enu ganov bevadai. And the same thing is true not only with gezela, but with geneva. And as you know from studying these halachas, the difference being is that gezela is a robbery and geneva is theft by stealth, but the halachas are the same. Ela sheches kaso ganav kagon, and that's true even if you don't know for sure that it was stolen, but rather it is assumed to be stolen. Kagon shomrei peiros shemochrim peiros b'makom tsanua. So, for example, let's say someone tells you, "Hey, there's a guy selling produce off the back of his truck. He's not selling it in a regular store. He's selling produce, in a hidden place, which is not well advertised. Kamo achore hagina, let's say behind the yard or something like that. O sharov hadavar hahu chezkaso ganav." Or that would be one example where you can reasonably assume it's stolen, because why would a guy be selling something off the back of a truck when he could more easily sell it out in the open in the open marketplace? Another example would be is that the commodity itself is known to be usually stolen. Kagon roe behemos acherim shemochrim chalav ugevina. He says, let's say there are shepherds, people who are hired out to watch other people's property. Normally, when you have a hired shepherd who watches other people's livestock, they're not allowed to benefit from the milk and the shearings or the cheese of these animals. Let's say you see a guy who's a known professional shepherd, and all of a sudden he's opened up his own side milk business on the side. Well, there's a reasonable assumption that that's stolen property, because he's supposed to deliver all of the milk to the owner. Sharov haroi mochrim mashagonvim velo shalahem. He says that would be an example of where you can reasonably assume that this is stolen. Velo midas haba olim, and they're doing it without the consent of the original owner. So in all of those kinds of scenarios where you see someone who's an employee of like an electronics company selling stuff on Craigslist or Kijiji, right, from his company on the side, so you know it's stolen. So asr liknos mehem olehonos mehem bechinam. So you're not allowed to buy from those people. You're not allowed to benefit from their commodities. Aval im hashomer mocher bigaloi al pesach hagina. But if a person, let's say, is a hired guard, and you see him selling openly produce at the entrance to the marketplace or to a garden, v'hasal o hamishkal o hamida lefanav, and he's got all of the weights and measures, and everyone can see him. So then mutar. So then it's permissible to purchase from him. Shaharei yesh l'davar kol. This is because what he's doing is out in the open, and people will hear about what he's doing. V'yodim haba'olim, and therefore the owner will be aware of what his behavior. Uladaitam hu mocher, and therefore you can assume that they're selling the commodity with permission of the owner. V'chein kol kayotze bazeh, and basically you have to use your judgment to extrapolate from these examples. You know, the halacha uses agricultural examples, but we can extrapolate that to other kinds of commodities that are non-agricultural in nature, like electronics and widgets or whatever else we're dealing with. The kulan sha'amru lahakona mehem the chulan sha'amru lahakona mehem hatmein asur likach mehem. But if the seller, when he sells you an object, he says, hide this, he says, don't tell your friends where you got it, then that's clear that it's stolen property, and therefore you're not allowed to purchase it. Okay, so I wanted you to see this halacha because it's very similar to the halacha that we learn now. In halacha chaf, it seems like that it does, if there's a reasonable assumption that it's stolen, you're not allowed to purchase it, period. And in the halacha that we just learned, it seems to be that there was a little bit more leniency, because he was saying that if there's a possibility that it's not stolen, you are allowed to buy it. Even though there's a greater chance that it is than it's not, you're still allowed to buy it. So this creates a bit of a conflict in the halacha, because so going back to what we're learning up here in Sif Yud, right? So what was the statement? He says, "Vafilu yeshlo ma'at shelo kayotze bo v'harbe kayotze bo shel gezel tolen lahakil shezehu shelo." He says, if there's a particular commodity that the guy, some of it he is legit, but the majority of that commodity is stolen, you're still allowed to buy that commodity from him, because you can assume it came from the legit minority and not from the illegitimate majority. And the question is, why can you do that? Because that seems to be in conflict with the halacha that we just stated, that whenever there's a reasonable assumption that it's stolen, you're not allowed to purchase from him. So that's the issue that I want us to take a look at. The Imrei Yaakov has one answer that I'm really not satisfied with, to be honest. But we'll just get started on the commentary. He says over here, to try and answer this question, he says, even though in Sifchaf, which we just read, it's taught that if the majority of that commodity is stolen, you're not allowed to purchase it, and we don't rely on a minority of legitimate stuff. He says the difference is that you're dealing over there with a guy who sells both stolen and non-stolen goods, but you're not sure which commodity is which. And therefore, it's usher to buy anything from him. But over here, this particular commodity is known to be some of it legitimate. Sheyesh lo vaday miyut mishalo, v'harei kilu muchach b'fnei atzma v'alkein havi le'kavua, ma she'enkein lekamen ein heter borur lefanenu, v'harov ugana v'alkein hazlinan basar ruba. Okay, so it's basically he's saying the distinction is, if you know for sure that that some of this commodity that he sells is legit, you're allowed to purchase that particular commodity. But in the other halacha, he's talking about where the majority of all goods in toto that he sells is stolen, and you're not sure if there's any of this commodity that is in front of you which is legit, So therefore, you're not allowed to buy anything from him. Not so crazy about that answer, but we're out of time for today. So we'll pick this up in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay? Hope everyone has a great day.